The night I refused to sign, my father raised his glass as though the simple lift of crystal could dismiss me. His hand didn't tremble. It never did. That steadiness had built his legend, had turned every dinner into a performance of authority. My mother sat beside him, lips curved in that soft smile she wore like jewelry. Elegant, practiced, carefully trained to blur conflict into something genteel. But her eyes didn't move toward me. They hovered on the glass on the way light fractured through it, as if watching the wine was easier than facing her youngest daughter. And then came my sister's voice. Catherine didn't raise it. She didn't have to. She leaned just far enough that her perfume cut through the smell of roasted lamb and polished wood, and she whispered, "You don't belong here." 4 words. They landed sharper than the pen they wanted me to hold. I sat at the long oak table, its polished surface gleaming under the chandelier's fractured light. The contract lay at the far end. Transfer and waiver, bold letters, inked black edges perfectly squared against the table runner. They thought it looked inevitable, like gravity. They thought I would sign because daughters always signed. But in front of me sat something else, a leather notebook. Brown scuffed corners bent from years of being opened in places no one thought to look. The spine creaked like old wood whenever I flipped its pages, and inside were the fragments of a life number's dates, overheard words at dinners when they forgot I was listening. To anyone else, it was nothing. To me, it was everything. That notebook was survival evidence memory stitched tight. When I touched it, I felt the echo of another table years ago. Not mahogany, not polished, not lit by chandeliers, an orphanage dining hall. Harsh fluorescent lights, buzzing like insects, metal trays clattering. I was 8. My hair was too long, my shoes too small. No one saved me a seat. I learned then that belonging was a contract written in silence, one you had to sign with obedience if you wanted food warmth, the illusion of safety. That night, staring at my family across this polished table, I heard the orphanage echo, "Silence is compliance." I did not stay silent. I came for family. I said my voice, even not contracts. The words hung in the air. The chandelier hummed. My father's jaw locked, his hand tightening on the stem of his glass. My mother's smile flickered but didn't break. Smiles were her armor, her way of keeping the illusion intact. Catherine tilted her glass eyes, glinting like she had already won. But none of them spoke. I opened the notebook. A small soundpaper against paper spine creaking. Yet in that silence, it might as well have been thunder. My sister's eyes narrowed. She remembered then what I kept in there. She remembered that leather could hold more weight than signatures. I kept my pen still. I kept my place at the table, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. The message arrived just past midnight, glowing cold against the dark screen of my phone. Catherine's name sat at the top, as crisp and deliberate as the letters she used to emboss on her invitations back when we were children. No emojis, no exclamation points, no softness, just words. Family gathering, birthday dinner, Saturday at 7. I stared at it longer than I should have. My sister's tone hadn't changed in years, command wrapped in courtesy control disguised as inclusion. She didn't say whose birthday, though. It didn't need saying. Catherine's birthdays were events, not celebrations. She curated them the way she curated her career. Her wardrobe, her social feeds, flawless, glossy, perfect. And in her perfection, there was always a gap just wide enough to push me out. Still, my chest tightened as I read it. Family gathering. The words felt heavy, like they carried a chance at something more than pageantry. My heart wanted to believe that maybe this time it would be different, that reconciliation could slip in between the toasts and the candlelight. After all, I still carried the ache of wanting to belong no matter how many times they reminded me I didn't. I typed 3 drafts of a reply. I'll be there. Too eager. Not sure I can make it. Too evasive. Thank you. Too cold. In the end, I sent nothing, letting silence serve as my RSVP. Catherine would take it as acceptance. She always did. The days leading up to Saturday stretched long and restless. Work couldn't anchor me, sleep wouldn't stay. I found myself returning again and again to the brown leather notebook on my desk, its worn cover a kind of compass. Every page I flipped reminded me of what I had survived: the contracts, the corrections, the careful erasures. Still, some stubborn part of me longed for repair, for the possibility that the family I'd been given might choose me this time instead of erasing me. On Saturday evening, the air carried the first bite of autumn. Leaves scraped across the pavement like brittle paper. I dressed simply: a navy dress, nothing extravagant, but clean lines, unpretentious. I slipped the notebook into my bag, not because I planned to use it, but because leaving it behind felt like walking unarmed into enemy territory. The house rose at the end of the drive, light spilling across the lawn like a staged photograph. Inside, I could already imagine the script unfolding: wine glasses aligned silver, polished to blinding sheen, Catherine at the center like a queen on her throne. I stood in the driveway for a long moment, my breath catching. The orphanage echo returned, faint but insistent. No one saves you a seat. You bring your own. I stepped inside. The warmth of chandeliers hit me first, followed by the perfume of roses carefully arranged in crystal vases. The scent of butter and herbs floated from the kitchen, masking the undercurrent of tension. Catherine appeared in the foyer. Her smile, wide arms outstretched, her dress a deep emerald that shimmered like wealth itself. "You came?" she said, as though surprised, though her tone suggested she'd never doubted it. She kissed the air beside my cheek, her perfume cloying, and guided me toward the dining room. Her hand on my back felt less like welcome and more like steering. The table gleamed beneath its white cloth name cards written in Catherine's looping script. I scanned quickly, my eyes landing on the edge, my seat as always, placed where the light faltered. Not at the center, not near the toasts, but at the periphery where shadows lingered. Catherine clinked her glass, her voice lifting easily. "Family," she said, her eyes scanning the table until they landed on me. "It means everything to me that we're all together tonight." The words brushed against me like silk covering steel. I smiled, though it felt fragile. My hand drifted unconsciously toward my bag, toward the weight of the notebook inside. I had come searching for reconciliation, but already the room hummed with the old choreography spotlights on some shadows for others. And yet I stayed, because even hope, fragile as glass, has its pull. The dining room should have smelled of butter and sugar candles burning low, while laughter skipped across polished silver. I braced for that familiar theater as Catherine led me through the house, my heels clicking against marble floors polished bright as glass. But instead of turning toward the chandeliered table, she angled her body toward a set of doors I had never seen opened before. Just a quick moment, she set her hand light against my back. I hesitated. Behind the doors, no music drifted, no clink of silver or shuffle of guests, just silence, heavy and waiting. She pushed them open. The room inside was not a dining room at all, but a conference chamber dressed in disguise, mahogany table leather chairs aligned with military precision, and a stack of folders centered like offerings. The curtains were drawn tight, muting the warm autumn evening into flat, artificial light. Julian Cross was already there. My brother-in-law wore his lawyer's uniform, dark suit tie, knotted neat expression polished into neutrality. At his side, another man rose, a stranger hair, silver glasses gleaming. His briefcase rested on the table, its brass clasp unlatched as though it had been waiting for me. Catherine's voice was silk. "Elizabeth, this won't take long." The stranger slid a folder forward, its edges aligned perfectly with the grain of the wood. His voice carried the calm assurance of someone used to signatures. "Transfer and waiver. Just sign. It'll only take 5 minutes. 5 minutes. As though erasure could be measured in minutes. My breath caught the air, suddenly tight. This was no birthday dinner. It was an ambush choreographed with crystal precision. I glanced toward the doorway, half expecting to see a cake waiting in the hall, balloons straining at their strings, but the doors had shut behind me. The celebration was elsewhere. Or maybe there was no celebration at all. Julian gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please sit." His tone was smooth, professional, as if this were any ordinary client meeting. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. I didn't sit. Instead, my hand brushed against the strap of my bag, the leather notebook pressing firm against my hip. Its presence steadied me, reminded me that this script had been rehearsed long before tonight. But so had mine. I lifted the folder. The paper inside was thick, embossed with the family crest. Words leapt out in bold black transfer of interest, waiver of claims, irrevocable. I flipped to the last page. The signature line glared up at me like a dare. "Why here?" I asked softly. "Why not at the table with the family?" Silence stretched, then Julian cleared his throat. "We thought it best to handle sensitive matters privately." Sensitive, I repeated the word, tasting of rust. The lawyer leaned forward, fingers steepled. "This is routine. Streamlines the trust. Everyone signs in turn. You'll be compensated, of course." Compensated. As if family could be translated into numbers, into clauses, into legal shorthand. As if belonging could be bought. My sister leaned against the doorway, her emerald dress catching the dim light. She smiled, faintly triumph tucked in the corners of her lips. "It's simple, Liz. Don't make it harder than it has to be." I thought of the orphanage dining hall again. Metal trays, buzzing lights, no seat saved for me. This was the same performance, just dressed in finer clothes. I set the folder down. I came for family, not contracts. The lawyer's brow furrowed, unused to resistance. Julian's jaw tightened, his voice a fraction sharper. "Elizabeth, let's not turn this into a scene. Just sign. It'll only take 5 minutes." The words echoed in my chest. Only 5 minutes. The way a surgeon might say only a small cut. The way a thief might whisper only a moment. But I did not move toward the pen. The notebook in my bag was heavy as stone, its pages whispering, "Don't forget. Don't erase, don't yield." The folder still lay open on the polished table, its pages waiting like a snare. I could feel every eye on me, Julian's lawyerly calm beginning to crack Catherine's satisfaction, humming just beneath her breath, the stranger's pen already uncapped as though my compliance were inevitable. I pressed my palm against the leather notebook in my bag, grounding myself in its weight. Then I lifted my chin and said, steady as I could, "I came for family, not contracts." The words dropped like a stone in water, rippling outward, breaking the carefully staged stillness. For a moment, no one moved. The silence thickened, pressing against my ribs. My mother's lips parted, her smile trembling for the first time all night. Catherine's eyes narrowed, a flicker of annoyance chasing away her polished calm. Julian leaned back, exhaling through his nose as though I'd just taken the scenic route when he'd promised efficiency. And then my father moved. Richard Whitmore sat at the head of the room as though it were still a dining hall, as though mahogany and contracts could not strip him of ceremony. He lifted his glass of red wine, swirling the liquid until it caught the light like blood. His voice was deep, steady, rehearsed over decades of boardrooms and public speeches. "Then don't expect another seat at this table. A verdict." The room seemed to tilt. My mother reached for his arm, fingertips brushing against his sleeve, but he didn't look at her. Her smile reassembled itself, brittle but present, as though if she could just hold it long enough, the illusion of harmony would return. I swallowed hard. My seat at the table had never truly been mine, but hearing the words aloud was different, like having the door slammed shut in plain sight of witnesses. Julian cleared his throat, attempting to smooth the edges. Elizabeth, emotions run high in moments like this. Perhaps if you reconsider, I don't need to reconsider. My voice surprised even me with its strength. I know exactly what's being asked. And I'm saying no. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his tone colder now. Refusal may have consequences. You understand that? Consequences. Another word for exile, for erasure, for punishment cloaked in civility. Richard sipped his wine unbothered. Every family has to decide who belongs. Tonight you've made your choice. I wanted to laugh at the inversion that I was the one discarding them when they had scripted my erasure long before this night. But the laugh stuck in my throat, tangled with the ache of recognition. Catherine spoke then, her tone smooth, her emerald dress shimmering as she leaned forward. "Liz, why do you make it so hard? We offered you dignity, compensation, even privacy, but you'd rather posture, rather make a scene. It's exhausting." Her words slid across the table like knives wrapped in silk. I met her gaze. "You mistake survival for posturing." The chandelier hummed the air, vibrating with tension. I realized then that this wasn't just about a contract. This was about rewriting history, about trimming the family tree so my name would never appear on its branches. My mother whispered so faint I almost missed it. Please just think about it. Her eyes darted nervously between us, her smile faltering again. She was always the peacekeeper, smoothing over cracks with soft words and softer denials. But tonight the crack had widened into a canyon. I pushed the folder back across the table, its edges catching against the wood. The pen rolled, clattering softly before stilling. I don't need more time, I said. I won't sign. The stranger snapped the folder shut, irritation breaking through his professional mask. Julian pinched the bridge of his nose. Catherine exhaled sharply, shaking her head. And Richard, steady as stone, lifted his glass higher, sealing the verdict with a sip. The orphanage echo roared in my ears, no seat, no plate, no belonging. Only this time I wasn't 8 years old. This time I had my notebook, my memory, my proof. I was no longer asking for a seat. I was choosing to stand. The night air outside my parents' house was sharp colder than it should have been for early autumn. I drove home with the windows cracked, the wind whipping at my face like it was trying to strip away the words that had been spoken inside. Then don't expect another seat at this table. But nothing stripped them away. They clung to me like smoke. By the time I reached my apartment, my hands ached from gripping the wheel too tightly. The leather notebook sat on the passenger seat, its weight a silent witness to the evening. I carried it upstairs, dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and collapsed into the chair at my desk without even changing out of the navy dress. The room smelled faintly of coffee grounds and old paper, my refuge. I should have gone to bed, buried myself under blankets, but a gnawing impulse dragged me toward the laptop. Some instinct whispered that the damage had already begun. My fingers trembled as I logged in the screen glow, washing my face pale. The trust account opened with a familiar loading screen, the crest embossed in digital blue. I had checked it 100 times before, my name always there, a quiet reassurance even when the family treated me like a ghost. But tonight, as the page refreshed, my stomach dropped. The line where my name should have been gone. It wasn't crossed out, wasn't replaced. It simply wasn't there. The list jumped from Catherine's name straight to Julian's as though I had never existed in the structure at all. I clicked again. Refreshing. Refreshing, but the result didn't change. My hands were icy on the keyboard. Heart pounding, I opened the insurance portal, another system tied to the family accounts. The screen flickered, then loaded a message in clinical black text, "Access revoked." That was all. No explanation. No recourse. Just 2 words that cut deeper than anything said in that dining room. I sat back, my breath shallow. It was one thing to be told you don't belong. It was another to see the machinery of bureaucracy erase you with such precision that it was as if you had never been there at all. The leather notebook lay on the desk beside me. I opened it, flipping to the back where I had scrawled login details. Transaction notes. Dates of every family meeting. My handwriting sprawled across the page, proof that I had existed, that I had been part of the ledger. I ran my fingers over the ink, half afraid it too might fade. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the laptop fan. I felt a strange dizziness, like the walls themselves were slipping me out of their memory. As though if I blinked too long, my furniture might forget I had ever lived here. I remembered the orphanage again, the first time I realized how easily children could disappear from rosters, their names shuffled, their beds reassigned. Back then, I had whispered my own name under my breath at night, over and over, just to anchor myself to the world. Now, 20 years later, I whispered it again. Elizabeth Whitmore. The sound was shaky, but it filled the room, fighting the silence. I scribbled the date in the notebook. Beneath it, I wrote the words exactly as the portal displayed them, access revoked. Then I underlined it twice. If they wanted me gone, they would have to reckon with the fact that I kept the record. But the ache was still there, hollow and deep. The ache of being erased, not by accident, not by neglect, but by deliberate choice. It felt like watching your reflection vanish from a mirror while the glass remained intact. I closed the laptop. The screen went black, leaving me face to face with my own faint reflection. For the first time, I understood what my father's words had really meant. Not just no seat at the table, no name in the ledger, no trace in the system. They wanted a world where I had never existed. But I was still here, and I still had the notebook. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the words, "Access revoked," seared behind my eyes like neon. Every time I closed them, I saw my father's glass of red wine, my sister's half-smile, the folder sliding across the table like a guillotine. At some point before dawn, I rose and padded barefoot to the desk where my leather notebook waited. Its pages whispered as I flipped through them, date after date, detail after detail, a chronicle of every slight I had once tried to forgive. My handwriting looked back at me like an echo refusing to fade. It was then that a memory surfaced. A photograph. I could see it clearly, though I hadn't thought about it in years. Catherine's birthday, maybe 10 years ago. We had gathered in the garden, the air thick with lilacs and wine. A cousin had snapped a photo of us, all my parents at the center. Catherine leaning in like the jewel of the family, Julian, close by her side. I had been there too, sitting at the edge of the table in a pale blue dress. But when the photo was posted on Catherine's feed, I was gone. At the time, she laughed it off. The crop was just for symmetry, Liz. You know how feeds work. You'll thank me, it makes the composition stronger. She said it with that airy confidence that always made me feel small for protesting, and I believed her, or tried to. I told myself it was an accident, or at worst, vanity. But now, staring at the words in my notebook, I understood. It hadn't been an accident. The crop had been the beginning of a pattern. There were other moments too unspooling now in my mind, like film reels. The family Christmas card where my name was misspelled so badly it might as well have belonged to someone else. The gala dinner where Catherine introduced herself as the Whitmore daughter, pausing just long enough to imply she was the only one. The summer trip when I asked for a copy of the family photo, only to be told the file was corrupted, though I later saw it framed in Catherine's office without me. Each memory carried the same hollow sting removal disguised as aesthetics omission softened into oversight. But together they formed a pattern sharp as glass. I leaned back in my chair, breath shallow. This wasn't the first erasure. It was simply the most final. My name stripped from the trust, my access revoked, it was the culmination of years of practice. Catherine had been cropping me out long before lawyers entered the picture. I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out a small stack of photos I had kept in envelopes. I spread them across the woodlight, catching their glossy surfaces. There I was younger, smiling at the edge of frames. And there I wasn't erased by scissors or filters or a sister's careful eye. The hollow pattern stared back at me. I picked up the pen and wrote across a blank page of the notebook, "Not the first." Never the first. Always a pattern. My hand shook, but the ink sank deep, permanent. Outside the window, dawn broke pale and hesitant, the sky bleeding into gray. The city began to stir, garbage trucks grinding down the street, neighbors rattling doors. The world carried on as though nothing had shifted. But inside my apartment, I knew something irrevocable had. I wasn't just fighting a contract. I was fighting a history of absence, a choreography designed to delete me one frame at a time. And patterns, once recognized, cannot be unseen. The morning after the erasure, I opened my phone and found my sister waiting for me on every screen. Catherine's post had gone live just before dawn, scheduled no doubt to maximize reach. Family Legacy United, the caption read in her looping script, polished as if she had borrowed it from a press release. Beneath it, a photograph spread wide across the screen, the Whitmores gathered in the garden. Crystal glasses, raised teeth gleaming beneath perfect lighting. My parents sat in the center, Catherine angled forward, and Emerald Julian at her side. Even Richard, who rarely smiled, wore an expression carefully softened by wine and camera. It was a portrait of harmony, of legacy, of unity. And I wasn't in it. The edge of the table was visible, cropped just enough that my chair where I had sat, hands folded, smile tight, had vanished. No empty space remained. The crop was seamless, as though the composition had always been meant that way. I stared at it until my throat closed. The comments streamed in below, beautiful family. What a legacy. Catherine, you're glowing. Every heart emoji, every clapping hand, every chorus of praise was another nail in the coffin of my existence. I whispered to myself, half in disbelief I was there. But the photo told a different story. And in the modern world, stories live where photos live. By noon, the post had been shared by local society accounts. Then the articles came. A small feature in the Whitmore Chronicle first, then a reprint in the City Lifestyle magazine. The headline read, "Whitmore Family Legacy Stands Strong Amid Rumors." The article quoted Catherine directly. "Family comes first. We've never been stronger." My name appeared only once, buried halfway down in a single sentence framed with barbed courtesy. Some have raised questions about Elizabeth Whitmore, the youngest daughter whose behavior in recent months has been described as unstable by sources close to the family. Unstable. The word seared through me hotter than any contract, sharper than any revoked access. They weren't content to erase me. They wanted to rewrite me, to leave behind a version that explained my absence as madness instead of manipulation. I closed the article, but the word clung, echoing in the silence of my apartment. My notebook lay open on the desk, last night's entry, glaring up at me, access revoked. Now I added beneath it in jagged ink, unstable. My phone buzzed again, a message from an old college friend, Sarah. "Hey, saw the article. Are you okay? Should I be worried?" I didn't reply. What could I say that my family had cropped me out of their legacy and handed me a diagnosis I'd never owned? That truth had been traded for PR so clean and shiny the world would never bother to question it. I stood at the window staring out at the city. Cars streamed past indifferent. A man carried coffee cups across the street. A woman pulled her child along by the hand. Life moved forward oblivious. And here I was, erased, replaced, rebranded. The worst part wasn't the lie itself. It was how easy it was for people to believe it. Because Catherine knew the power of image. She had always known. She understood that truth doesn't matter when the picture is perfect, when the caption is confident, when the headlines hum in your favor. But I had something she didn't. I had the notebook. And inside it, I carried the other story, the one they couldn't crop, couldn't caption, couldn't spin. For the first time since the dining room trap, my hands steadied. I closed the notebook gently as though sealing an oath. The auditorium smelled faintly of polished wood and lilies, the kind of floral arrangement that tries too hard to cover the truth of decay. A banner stretched across the stage, celebrating the legacy of Richard Whitmore, visionary, builder, father. The words shimmered under the stage lights, their grandeur heavy enough to crush anything smaller, messy or real. Rows of suited men and jeweled women filled the seats, murmuring into programs that listed Richard's accomplishments like scripture. Stocks, properties, foundations, awards. His empire cataloged neatly on glossy paper, a kingdom reduced to bullet points. I sat in the back, the leather notebook tucked in a folder on my lap. Its weight was steady, its presence familiar, but my fingers shook as I held it. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure whether it was a weapon or a lifeline. Catherine stood at the podium, emerald silk, once again wrapping her in perfection. Her voice carried easily polished to sound both intimate and grand. She was in her element here, the stage light catching the glint of her earrings, the rapt attention of the audience feeding her like oxygen. My father, she began, was a man who believed in legacy. He taught us that family is the foundation of every success. But as he often reminded us, not every child fits a family. And that is okay, because legacy isn't about individuals, it's about unity. The crowd nodded. Some even smiled as though she had delivered a profound truth instead of a blade disguised as wisdom. My throat tightened. The words hit like cold iron, echoing in me louder than the applause. Not every child fits a family. She had said it like a proverb, like a line rehearsed for print, and in that moment I knew exactly who she meant. I gripped the folder tighter. Inside the notebook, pressed back against my palms, every page a silent protest. Every scribbled date, every recorded slight, every cropped photo. Proof that I had not just failed to fit, but had been cut away piece by piece by those who now applauded their own perfection. I didn't stand. I didn't speak. I stayed in the shadowed row, the notebook my only company, as Catherine continued to rewrite the story of our lives. Behind her, a slideshow flickered across the screen. Richard shaking hands with governors. Richard cutting ribbons at hospitals. Richard raising a glass at galas. each photo framed to radiate power, stability, grace. My mother appeared in several, her smile soft, her hand looped through his arm like a prop. Catherine, of course, gleamed in nearly every one daughter of legacy heir apparent. I searched the images for myself, and there it was again, the hollow pattern. Photos I remembered being in the charity gala, the vineyard trip, the holiday dinner, each one cropped. Angles adjusted. My face trimmed neatly from the edges like weeds from a garden. The slideshow ended with applause. Catherine's smile widened, gracious and controlled, as though she had given the crowd a gift instead of a verdict. The man beside me whispered, "What a family. Truly inspiring." My chest burned. "Inspiring," he said. "Legacy," she said. But what I saw was a story built on erasure, a performance so convincing that strangers believed it without question. When the applause faded, Catherine stepped aside. A minister offered closing words, polished, forgettable. The audience rose, the scrape of chairs against polished floor filling the silence left behind. I didn't move. Instead, I opened the folder just enough to see the brown leather cover inside. Its surface was worn, the edges softened from years of use. I ran my thumb along the seam, steadying my breath. I wasn't ready to speak. Not yet. But I was ready to hold my ground. If Catherine's weapon was spin, mine was record. She had images and applause. I had pages and ink. And when the time came, I would use them. The apartment looked like a storm had torn through it. Folders spread across the floor in crooked constellations. Papers spilled from drawers. Receipts curled at the edges. Timelines scrawled across sticky notes that clung to the desk like desperate survivors. My laptop hummed screens glowing with open spreadsheets. Bank portals archived emails. I was pulling it all out, every scrap, every line, every timestamp. Because Catherine had her stage, her podium, her spin, and I had this. Receipts. The brown leather notebook lay open in the center, its spine creaking as though it too had grown weary of holding so much. Page after page, my handwriting marched on dates of meetings, whispers from dinners, the times they thought I wasn't listening. I laid these beside the trust account logs I'd printed, highlighting the exact moment my access disappeared. The hollow pattern was no longer memory. It was evidence. The words replayed in my head as I worked steady as a drumbeat, receipts don't lie. People do. The knock at my door startled me. 3 quick taps, then silence. I froze, heart kicking. Few people visited me anymore. Most had chosen sides, and sides were rarely mine. I opened the door to find Noah Lee standing in the hall, his coat damp from the evening rain. He wasn't family, not by blood, but he had always hovered at the edges, an analyst once tied to the Whitmore projects. Quiet, watchful, too sharp for Catherine to ever fully control. Without a word, he stepped inside, glancing at the sea of papers with something between admiration and concern. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver USB drive. He set it gently on the desk right beside the notebook. "These came to me by mistake," he said softly, though his eyes suggested he had made sure of the mistake. "Emails, transfers. You'll want to see them." My hand hovered above the drive. It gleamed under the desk lamp, cool and unassuming, yet heavy with promise. I plugged it in. Folders bloomed across the screen, strings of emails, memos, wire transfers. I clicked through pulse hammering as the story unspooled. Money siphoned through shell accounts, credits disguised as consulting fees, signatures blurred by hasty scans, and always Catherine's name threaded in the headers, her fingerprints disguised as elegance. I leaned back, breath shallow. My notebook already carried enough to prove patterns of exclusion. But this was currency. Proof of deliberate deception, not just against me, but against investors, insurers, even the family trust itself. I looked at Noah. "Why give this to me?" He shrugged, lips thin. "Because receipts don't lie. People do. And you're the only one who keeps them." The phrase echoed in my chest, fusing with the beat that had carried me all night. Receipts don't lie. People do. I turned back to the desk, layering the USB files with my notes, cross-checking every date, every figure. Hours blurred into dawn. Coffee went cold beside me, untouched. The city outside shifted from midnight silence to the hum of morning commuters, but I stayed at the desk, pages and screens weaving into a tapestry of truth. At last, I leaned back, my body aching, my eyes raw. Before me lay the beginnings of a case not just against Catherine, but against the story she had built. The folder was thick now, fat with printouts and timelines, the notebook nestled on top like a crown. I closed it slowly, pressing my palm against the worn cover. This was no longer survival. This was strategy. Receipts don't lie. People do. And when the time came, I would let the receipts speak for me. The folder on my desk was already thick, its spine struggling to close. The brown leather notebook lay on top, its cover darkened by years of my fingerprints. Pages of receipts sprawled beneath it. Emails, transfers, photos. Logs. Evidence had grown heavy, but so had the silence around me. Until the knock came. It was late past 10, the city muffled under drizzle. I almost didn't answer. But when I opened the door, Ivy stood there. My cousin. The quiet one. The one most people forgot was even in the room at family gatherings. She had always been the kind who slipped into corners, jotting in journals, eyes lowered as though the world wasn't hers to claim. Her hair clung damp to her cheeks, her coat dripping onto the floor. In her arms, she carried a small blue notebook, its cover worn but intact. She held it out without preamble, her hands trembling. "I think you need this," she said. I stared, unable to move at first. Then I took it gently, the weight familiar cousin to my own. The blue cover was softer than mine. Corners frayed, the faint outline of pressed pen marks visible even before I opened it. Inside notes. Precise, meticulous, dated. Ivy's handwriting was neat, deliberate, almost architectural. One entry caught my eye, immediately underlined twice in blue ink. Board meeting, Catherine presented Elizabeth's model. Rebranded it as her own. No mention of Elizabeth. Beneath it, Ivy had written, "Credit taken. Truth hidden." My throat tightened. I flipped further. Pages upon pages echoed the same story, Catherine stepping into light that was not hers. My work smoothed out of existence, my presence trimmed from records. Ivy had been there, pen in hand, when I thought no one noticed. I looked up. Why keep this? Her eyes flicked away, her voice almost a whisper. Because I saw what they were doing. And I didn't think anyone would believe me if I said it out loud. So I wrote it down. Every time. I thought maybe, someday, it would matter. A silence stretched between us. The sound of rain tapped against the window, soft and insistent. "You're not unstable." She added, her tone firmer now. "You're erased. That's different." The words landed like a key turning in a locked door. I set her notebook beside mine. Brown leather against blue cover. 2 witnesses, now not one. 2 records. 2 truths that aligned without rehearsal. For the first time in months, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen. Ivy folded her arms, watching me carefully. "They think they can write you out, but they forgot I was in the room too. Invisible doesn't mean absent." I smiled faintly, though my eyes burned. "You were always the quiet one." "Quiet isn't the same as blind," she replied. We spent hours at the desk, our notebooks side by side, cross-referencing. Her blue pages confirmed my brown. My logs completed her observations. The pattern grew undeniable, 2 lines of truth weaving into a net too strong to ignore. By dawn, we sat in silence. Exhaustion heavy, but something else present too. Not just survival. Not just strategy. Solidarity. I closed both notebooks, stacking them neatly. The brown on top, the blue beneath their spines, pressed together like siblings. For years, I had believed I was alone. That my notebook was the only voice speaking against the void. But now I understood erasure had witnesses. And some of them had been writing too. An unexpected ally had appeared, and with her, the truth had doubled its strength. The night was thick with silence, the kind that presses against the windows like fog, making even the hum of the refrigerator sound intrusive. Papers covered every inch of my desk. Brown notebook, blue notebook, silver USB timelines marked in fluorescent highlighter. Evidence had grown into a landscape, But even with Ivy's witness notes and Noah's transfers, something felt missing. A center. A voice strong enough to cut through Catherine's spin and Richard's verdict. I was sliding another stack of receipts into order when the call came. The number was unfamiliar local. For a moment, I considered letting it ring into the void, but instinct urged me to answer. Elizabeth Whitmore. The voice was calm, measured with the faint rasp of age. Yes. This is Carver. Your father's estate attorney. The name hit me like a jolt. I had seen him before at galas, hovering in the background with quiet authority, his red leather folders always tucked under one arm. A man of records, not performances. I have something you should hear, he said. Richard asked me to hold it. Not for the others. For you. An hour later, he sat across from me at the desk, the rain of his arrival dripping from his trench coat onto my floor. In his hands, the folder. Red leather edges burnished with age brass clasp gleaming. It looked unremarkable, yet heavier than any document I had handled so far. He placed it in front of me without flourish. Your father didn't trust the spin, he said simply. He knew how easily stories bend. He wanted a record that couldn't be cropped. My breath caught as I undid the clasp. Inside lay a single flash drive cushioned in paper. My hands trembled as I slid it into the laptop. The file opened, and then his voice. Not Catherine's. Not Julian's. Not mine. My father's. Elizabeth built this. Richard's voice said steady, recorded with the clarity of intent. Don't let them erase her. The words filled the room heavier than any gavel, louder than any toast. For a moment I couldn't breathe. This was the man who had raised a glass against me, who had pronounced my exile at the table. Yet here in his own voice he acknowledged the truth he had never spoken in public. Ivy's hand flew to her mouth. Noah leaned forward, eyes sharp, as if the sound alone vindicated years of quiet suspicion. I played it again, and again. Each repetition carved deeper into the silence that had ruled my life. Elizabeth built this. Don't let them erase her. Tears stung my eyes, but they weren't the fragile tears of longing. They were fierce, burning, edged with something close to triumph. My father had left me nothing at the table, nothing in the trust. But he had left me this. The smoking gun. Mr. Carver leaned back, folding his hands. Richard wasn't a kind man, but he was a precise one. He wanted this recorded. He wanted it held, and he wanted you to have it when the time came. The red folder sat open on the desk, its lining glowing faintly under the lamp. My brown notebook lay beside it, Ivy's blue notebook stacked close, the silver USB shining like a coin. 4 witnesses, now mine, Ivy's, Noah's, and Richard's. The truth no longer whispered. It thundered. I pressed my palm against the folder against the weight of his voice and whispered back into the silence. They won't erase me. The phrase replayed in my head, braided with his words. Elizabeth built this. Don't let them erase her. For the first time, I believed I had more than evidence. I had inevitability. The courtroom smelled of paper and polish, a mixture that clung to the air like history itself. Rows of wooden benches creaked as spectators shifted their murmurs, dimming to silence as the bailiff's gavel struck once. My heart thudded in my chest, steady but loud, each beat echoing against the marble walls. At the front, the judge adjusted her glasses. Her face, unreadable, carved from the same stone as the columns behind her. Beside her, the court clerk organized folders into precise stacks, the shuffle of paper sounding sharper than whispers. And then Mr. Carver rose. He carried with him the red leather folder, the same one he had placed in my hands days before, its brass clasp gleaming like a seal of fate. When he stepped into the light, the entire room seemed to tilt toward him. Even Catherine's confident posture faltered for a fraction of a second. Julian's jaw tightened, his fingers drumming against the polished table. Carver opened the folder with deliberate care. The sound of the clasp releasing echoed like a gunshot in the silence. He drew out the document, thick paper embossed with the crest. And in that moment, everything stilled, the kind of hush that lives before storms, before verdicts, before truths no one can unhear. He cleared his throat. His voice was steady, deliberate, resonant. Ownership belongs to Elizabeth Harrington. Any changes were unauthorized. The words cut through the chamber like steel. For a moment, no one breathed. The overhead lights hummed faintly, but it was the spotlight that mattered, the harsh white beam that angled down onto Catherine and Julian, pinning them as though the truth itself had hands. Catherine's smile, once her strongest weapon, flickered and fell. Julian's shoulders stiffened, his lips parting as if to argue, but no words came. Silence swelled thick as tar. In that silence, I felt the weight of years pressing against me, the cropped photographs, the revoked access, the whispered label of unstable. Each one dissolved beneath the gavel of my father's recorded voice, beneath Ivy's notes, beneath Noah's USB, beneath Carver's calm recital. The narrative they had built so carefully cracked open, light seeping into the fractures. I sat straighter, the brown notebook resting on the table before me, its cover worn but resolute. Beside it lay Ivy's blue notebook, Noah's silver USB, and the red folder that had delivered the final blow. 4 colors, 4 witnesses. Together they formed a spectrum of truth too vivid to deny. The judge leaned forward slightly, her gaze sharp, assessing. The gallery behind me shifted, whispers rising like wind through dry leaves. But up front, in the glare of the spotlight, Catherine and Julian were statues caught cornered, undone. I wondered if Catherine remembered all the times she had cropped me out of photos, cut me from frames, tilted the lens to erase me. Now it was she who stood at the edge of the picture light, glaring, too bright smile gone legacy slipping from her grip. Carver closed the folder with finality, the clasp clicking shut like the lid of a coffin. Then he turned slightly toward me, his eyes steady, almost kind. "The record stands," he said. The judge nodded once. "Let the record reflect." And in that moment, I understood it wasn't just about contracts or legacies. It was about existence, about being written back into the story they had tried to erase. The silence in the room was no longer heavy with dread. It was heavy with truth. And truth, unlike people, does not lie. The gavel struck once, sharp as bone against wood. The sound rippled through the chamber, scattering the last of the whispers that had been rising since Mr. Carver's declaration. I sat rigid in my chair, the leather notebook pressed flat under my palm, its spine warm against my skin as if it had a pulse of its own. The judge adjusted her glasses, her gaze sweeping the courtroom. Her voice was calm, unshaken, yet weighted with authority. "This court finds the contested contract fraudulent. The so-called transfer and waiver is hereby declared void. Any amendments executed under it are invalid." Further, she paused, her eyes locking on Catherine, then Julian. "Catherine Whitmore is removed as trustee effective immediately." A collective murmur surged through the gallery, half gasp, half hiss, a wave breaking against marble. Catherine's shoulders jerked back as though she'd been struck. Julian stiffened, his knuckles whitening on the polished table jaw, working as though words might save him. But none came. The spotlight above hummed its pale glare, catching the sharp line of Catherine's cheekbone. For once, she had no camera to turn to, no caption to hide behind. Only silence thicker now than ever before. The judge's gavel struck again. "The record reflects ownership remains with Elizabeth Harrington." The sound echoed through me louder than any applause could ever be. Not victory. Not triumph. Just truth spoken aloud where silence had ruled too long. I did not smile. I did not raise my head in pride. Instead, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, a long exhale that trembled as it left me. My fingers tightened around the brown notebook until the leather creaked. Every page inside whispered back to me. Steady as a heartbeat. Receipts don't lie. People do. For a moment, the past surged through me all at once. The cropped photographs, the blank place cards, the revoked access, the word unstable in black print. My father's toast. Then don't expect another seat at this table. All of it swirled like smoke dissolving under the weight of this moment. The gavel had cut through their story. My notebook had carried mine here. Across the aisle, my mother's smile trembled, the practiced curve faltering as though she too felt the scaffolding collapsing. She lowered her eyes' fingers, worrying the lace handkerchief in her lap. I wondered if she heard the orphanage echo in her own chest. The silence of children unchosen, the absence that eats at the edges of family. Catherine stared straight ahead, her lips pressed into a pale line. She had always known how to fill silence with her voice, her presence, her control. But now silence filled her instead. Julian leaned toward her, whispering something frantic, but she did not respond. The spotlight stayed fixed, exposing them both. Mr. Carver gathered his red folder with deliberate care, nodding once toward me as though to say, "It is done." Beside me, Ivy placed her blue notebook gently on the table, a silent offering solidarity inked in every page. Noah's silver USB still glinted under the light, quiet as a blade sheathed but not forgotten. 4 colors, 4 allies. But it was the brown leather notebook beneath my hand that mattered most. The one I had carried through years of erasure, the one that had kept me anchored when even my name slipped from records. I squeezed it tighter, not to claim victory, but to remind myself I was still here. The judge rose. This hearing is adjourned. Chairs scraped against marble. Voices returned low and urgent, carrying gossip already spinning into narrative. But their noise washed over me like rain against glass. I stayed seated still, breath steady now, leather pressed firm to my chest. I had not won a seat at their table. I had built my own. And though my name had been erased 100 times today, it had been written back, carved into record impossible to crop. I did not smile. I did not cheer. I only breathed the kind of breath that comes when a weight you've carried too long finally loosens. And in that quiet, I understood truth is not a shout. Truth is a record. And the record had spoken. The air inside the boardroom felt different now. Not the suffocating weight of silence that had once pressed against me, but something lighter, sharper, alive. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, cutting bright lines across the table where a new crest lay etched on the agenda folders. The Harrington crest. For years it had been their weapon, stamped onto contracts, embossed onto invitations, engraved into silver, as if the symbol itself could erase me. But today it was mine. Reborn. No longer chained to secrecy and erasure, but reclaimed, redrawn, carrying the weight of truth. I had renamed the trust not as an act of vanity, but of purpose. The Harrington Foundation for Ethical Legacy. The words gleamed on the letterhead, fresh ink pressed into thick paper. I had chosen them carefully. Legacy had been their excuse, their shield for lies. Now it would become accountability. Not a monument to power, but a foundation for record, for evidence, for ethics that could not be cropped. Noah sat to my right. His silver USB drive resting on the table like a quiet reminder of how far we'd come. His eyes were sharp, steady, scanning the documents as though ready to defend them with the same precision he had once used to track wire transfers. He was no longer a silent ally in the margins. He was on the board, his voice part of the architecture of the future. Ivy sat to my left, her blue notebook open, her pen poised as always. She had been the invisible cousin, the one no one thought worth noticing. Today she was a founding member of the council, her meticulous notes no longer whispers but cornerstones. The world would know her record-keeping mattered. The blue cover, once hidden in drawers, now lay beside my brown notebook. 2 colors, 2 witnesses, equal weight. And Catherine. She was nowhere. Her face appeared in none of the photographs framed on the wall, none of the press packets waiting by the door. For the first time, images of the family told the truth, those who had built, those who had recorded, those who had carried the receipts forward. Not the ones who had cropped, silenced, erased. I ran my hand across the agenda folder, feeling the crest beneath my fingertips. It was still the Harrington emblem, but altered a subtle shift in its design. Where once it had been a shield rigid and impenetrable, now it was a circle open and continuous, a symbol of truth carried forward. My voice was calm when I spoke, but it carried farther than I expected. This foundation will not bury history, I said. It will preserve it. We will fund projects that ensure records are kept, voices are protected, and no one can be erased again. Noah nodded. Ivy scribbled the words down her pen, moving quick, anchoring them to the page. I thought of the courtroom, of Carver's red folder, of my father's voice echoing, "Elizabeth built this. Don't let them erase her." I thought of the nights alone at my desk, the weight of erasure pressing like a stone, the notebook the only thing keeping me tethered. I thought of the orphanage echo, the blank seat at the table, the cropped photographs, the headlines calling me unstable. And now here, a crest reclaimed, a legacy rebuilt, a table where my allies sat beside me, not above me. The photographers outside would ask for a picture when the meeting adjourned. This time, when the shutter clicked, there would be no crop, no erasure. The frame would hold exactly who belonged, not by blood, not by manipulation, but by record, by choice, by truth. I closed the brown notebook, slowly sliding it beside Ivy's blue one, their covers aligned. Two spines pressed together, holding the past and the future between them. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to smile, not wide, not triumphant, just enough to feel the weight lift enough to let the air in. The crest had been theirs. Now it was mine, and it would outlast us all. They tried to crop me out, but I kept the receipts, and receipts outlast lies. The words rang in the air, not shouted, not desperate, just carved like the names on the plaques. Permanent. I breathed in slow and steady, the weight on my chest lighter now. For the first time in years, I wasn't holding on out of fear. I was holding on because truth had a place, carved in wood, inked in pages, sealed in files. The office was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt earned. Afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, painting the walls in amber stripes. The hum of the city lay faint in the distance, softened by glass like a world kept at bay. I stood in the center, the brown notebook resting on the desk one last time, its cover worn smooth from years of use. It had carried me through silence, through exile, through rooms where my name was spoken only to erase it. Now it would rest here, not hidden, not clutched in fear, but displayed a relic of survival and proof of truth. On the wall before me hung two plaques. The first carried my father's name, Richard Harrington. Bronze letters cut deep into polished wood, sharp and steady. He had been both the blade and the silence, both the toast and the verdict. He had raised his glass to exile me, and yet in his recorded voice he had left me the words that pulled me back. Elizabeth built this. Don't let them erase her. That contradiction was carved here in his name, a reminder that even flawed voices can speak truth in the end. Beside it, gleaming in fresh brass, was mine Elizabeth Harrington. The letters were crisp, unweathered, carrying the sheen of beginning. My name had been cropped, revoked, buried under headlines and lies. But here it could not be deleted, not crossed out, not scrolled past. The engraving was final cut deeper than erasure. I stepped back, letting the sight of the two names sink in. Father and daughter side by side. Not equal, not reconciled, but recorded. And recording was what mattered. The brown notebook sat open on the desk, its pages fluttering faintly in the air from the vent. Ivy's blue notebook lay beside it, her neat handwriting visible even from here. Noah's silver USB glinted in its case, a shard of proof in modern form. And Carver's red folder rested on the shelf spine, firm clasp still shining. 4 colors, 4 witnesses. Together they had carried me here. I closed my eyes and let the voiceover form in my mind, not Catherine's polished PR lines, not my father's toast, but my own calm and unwavering. The office light flickered, once catching on the plaques, throwing long shadows across the floor. I let the silence linger, heavy but clean. This was the ending. Not the neat reconciliation of family dinners, not the triumphant applause of victory. Just the record, just the truth. And that was enough. Has your family ever tried to erase you? 1. How? Yes. 0. Ow. No. Comment below.